In your sketchbook, draw 3 spectrum boxes. Make them, start at the top of one page of your sketchbook, and make them 21 centimeters long. So 0 to 21, then 3 centimeters tall, and then start on the left edge and measure 3 centimeter increments. Just put little tick marks. 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18. Then draw straight lines to section off the long rectangular box into 7 sections. Each one is 3 centimeters. 3 times 7 is 21. So I want to make 3 of these on my sketchbook page. In the top spectrum box, let's make a value spectrum with pencil. Now the point of this is to understand what is meant by a wide range of value. So we want to have a very dark value on the left and a very light value on the right. Now the main strategy that we'll be using to achieve that is varying the pressure that we place on the drawing tool. In this case it's a pencil. But we can also use different pencils. So that's why there's letters and numbers on the end of these pencils. Basically, they're referring to the purity of the graphite. The more pure the graphite, the darker the mark the pencil will make, or the darker the value. So an HB pencil is in the middle of the spectrum. The next, it's kind of like algebra. The next letter is B, but that means 1B. So the number 1 isn't actually put in front of the B. So HB, then B, then 2B, then 3B, 4B, 5B, 6B, 7B, 8B, 9B. It keeps going. So you don't necessarily need all these pencils. Even if you just have, say, a 2, a 4, and a 6, you can do a lot even just with those 3 pencils. So it's sometimes nice to start in the middle of the spectrum. So maybe with my 3B pencil, I'll start in box 1, 2, 3, 4, and I want to lay in a value that I know would be about a middle value. So I'm not pressing too hard, not pressing too light though, just kind of in between. And my goal is to create the same value throughout the square. Let me zoom in a little bit. Now, if I'm going to go to the right, I need to create a lighter value, and so basically I'll use the same pencil. I'm still going to use my 3B, but I'm not going to press as hard. So I'm barely pressing on the pencil or on the paper. Now I want to go even lighter, so I would switch to a 2B. It might not even be obvious under the camera that I'm laying down a value, but I did. It's very light. And then in my last box, barely pressing at all. So really decrease the pressure. Now going the other way, I would go back to my 3B, and in this third box I'm going to lay down a value that's darker than that in box 4, which means I have to, well, for one thing, lay down more value, cover up more of the white of the paper, lay down more graphite is what I meant to say, sorry. But I can also press harder with my drawing tool, of course, and that's going to create a darker mark, right? Okay, but not too dark because I still have 2 to go. I'm going to switch to my 6B pencil now, and in this second box I'm going to still shade in a consistent value. It's okay to change directions, but we don't really want to see directional marks. Or I don't anyway, I shouldn't say. I mean, it's not wrong to see some texture in your shading, but in this case, I'm trying not to. But again, it's not that it's wrong. In fact, it can be a good thing in your artwork to create some, like, show evidence of your actual shading by showing some line, some texture. In my box number 1, I have to press really hard, and if I can't get the value to be as dark as I want with this 6B, well then maybe I do have to switch. I actually do have a 7B here, and I might even be able to find myself a 9 or an 8B. So I can go pretty dark with this 7B. So if you are lucky enough at home to have a nice wide range of pencils, or if you're at school, then use them. But otherwise, you know, of course, your main strategic element is the pressure you place on the drawing tool. After you're finished creating 7 different values in graphite, try the same thing in charcoal. And depending on the type of charcoal you have, that's going to influence how hard you have to press on it, and maybe you have different softnesses of charcoal. So in other words, charcoal also comes much similar to pencils in like a rating. So for instance, look, I have this charcoal pencil that's rated as a 6B, and then I have this charcoal pencil, just a little nub of it, that's rated at a 4B. But then I also have this, you know, kind of mix mash of bits of charcoal, and I think some of this is Conte. So maybe I'll just try starting maybe in box 3, and I'm going to lay down some charcoal. Now, you might find that with charcoal, it's actually okay to use your finger a little bit to lay down some lighter values. So in other words, I can pick up a little bit of charcoal from box 3 and smudge it in my box 2 and 1, and I'm varying the pressure I put on my finger. So I'm using the smudging, not necessarily to smudge a gradation, but just to actually achieve the right value. So I'm going to lay down a little bit more charcoal. This is a pretty hard charcoal, I can tell. So I'm laying down some charcoal in box 4 here, and then I'm going to smudge it into box 3, but I'm going to be careful not to do any more smudging in box, sorry, I'm saying the numbers wrong. This would actually be box 4. And I'm going to smudge into box 5, but I'm going to be careful not to smudge any more into box 6 and 7. So in other words, those are done, because they're as light as I want them to be. So I'm kind of working backwards now. So I'll darken my box 4 a little bit, and then if I darken my box 4, I'm likely going to have to darken my box 3. Okay. So go ahead and, you know, use your finger as a tool with the charcoal. You don't need to do that with the graphite, but with the charcoal, yeah, you might have to. And if you have different softnesses, hardnesses of charcoal, then try them out. Like maybe I'll switch to this one now. Yeah, this one's a lot softer, so I'll put this one here in, look how black that is. I'll put this in my box 2. You'll find that charcoal is a little bit blacker than graphite. Graphite has more of a silver color, whereas charcoal is quite black. So now I'm going to go to my box 1. It's also very messy, by the way. Beware. Okay, box 1, really dark. I'll smudge to help achieve a consistent value throughout the box. And then maybe I'll pull a little bit of this black charcoal into my other boxes, just so it's not so, you know, gray or silvery. So it all kind of matches. I have unity. So I'm using a combination of the charcoal itself, pressure that I'm putting on the charcoal, but also my finger as a tool for smudging. Alright, so there's 7 different values with charcoal. In the last spectrum box, I want you to try using a tool that you cannot change the value of by changing pressure. So what am I talking about? Well, something like a pen. So now, with a pen, of course, you can make a variety of notational marks. Let's say I'm just going to make marks that are just straight parallel lines, but I'm laying them down at an angle like this within the box. Okay, and I'm just freehanding this, not using a ruler or anything. So notice how I started in the middle of my spectrum in box 4. So I'll consider that to be like my middle value. Now, if I want to make my next box lighter, I want to use the same type of notational mark making. How can I make the value lighter? Not by not pressing as hard with my pen. That doesn't really change the value of the ink, right? It's still just black ink. But you can see what I'm doing here. I'm changing the density of the mark making. So I'm leaving more space in between each parallel line. In box number 6, I'm going to leave a lot of space in between each parallel line. The other thing you can do actually is start to break the lines and make them shorter. So that's what I'll do in this last box that I want to make a very large value in. I'm going to use short lines that are really broken and really spread apart. So I still need to have some ink in that box, but the lines are shorter, using the term broken to describe them, and I've spaced them out. So there's a obvious change in value. Now if I go back to my box, or if I go to my box 3, I need to do the opposite. I need to create angled parallel lines that are really close together. In order to create a darker value. Because what's really going on here is that I'm just putting more ink in this box, right? So by drawing the lines closer together, I have more room to create more lines. So I'm going to essentially have more ink in that box. In box 2, I need to make the lines super close together. And in fact, I might even end up drawing over top of some of the lines that I already made. So if I see that the value in box 2 and 3 is too similar, then I need to go back and add more lines. I need to increase the density in box 2, but it's not supposed to be pitch black because it is box 2. If I want anything pitch black, then it would be box 1. Speaking of box 1, I will do it now, and notice how I'm kind of saving some time here and I'm going back and forth almost like a scribble, but the texture or the mark making still has that same angled parallel line appearance. So density. When we're using tools like pens and markers, it's all about density. It's not about pressure. Changing the pressure is not going to change the value. One more thing I'd like to point out is that it's not uncommon for artists to do this. Say they have a tone. Uh-oh, my pen's bombing out on me. There. Okay, so say I have that tone there, and then I have this tone here. Sorry, I'm using the word tone. I should stick to value. They essentially mean the same thing, but sometimes I'll use the word tone, but I want to try to be consistent. Okay, here's another common method. So I'll go a little bit darker here. cross-hatching. So in other words, what if I change the direction of my lines in box 1 here, or like 1B, and in box 2, but I'll maybe make the lines a little more spaced out in box 2. So by laying down more and more parallel lines, but changing their angles, we call that cross-hatching. That's another great way to achieve different values. So you can play around with that too. So that's 3 value spectrums, each having 7 different values. But what I want you to explore is how the quality of the mark making, or even the texture, the appearance, it's different depending on the drawing tool you're using, and then it's really different in the actual process, or the strategy varies using something that is dependent on pressure versus something that's dependent more on density. So experiment with that.